Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Aico TV.
I'm Holly Moore.
And I'm Alex Garmston, and today we have an action-packed episode lined up for you. But firstly, we want to share some exciting news with you. We have just announced or been told that we are the winner of the Best Health and Safety Product at the House Builder Product Awards. Holly, do you want to tell me a bit more about that?
Probably not, because I can't remember.
Holly can't remember, but it was the EI 1000G SmartLink Gateway that we won the Best Health and Safety Product Award for. There'll be more news on our website and social media shortly. Here's what's coming up on today's episode. Firstly, we have smart buildings with Leeds City Council. Our National Sales Manager Daniel Little will be speaking to Steven Blackburn.
Next, we have part 3 of our Sparky Ninja mini-series with Regional Specification Managers Carl Traynor and Andrew Sturgess.
Then we have our Relationships Manager Tina Mistry talking to Nick Kilby and Rob Chilton from Cratus.
And on this week's FAQ, we discuss the British standards.
Last week we had our National Sales Manager Daniel Little in the studio with Luke Loveridge, the CEO and founder of HomeLINK, a company we acquired last year and work very closely with. They've been speaking to Steven Blackburn from Leeds City Council about their smart build project. Let's have a look how the interview went and find out more about that project.
Hello and welcome to Aico TV. My name's Daniel Little, National Sales Manager here at Aico. I'm joined here today by Luke Loveridge from HomeLINK to talk about the Leeds City Council Smart Home, Healthy Home project. Hello Luke.
Hi Dan, hi everyone, thanks for being here today.
Okay, so just to get started, Luke, do you just want to tell us a little bit more about the Leeds City Council project?
Sure, so it's a really exciting project. Leeds is a really innovative city. When I was at British City Council, we were always looking at Leeds in terms of their smart city agenda, and it was really dynamic and progressive. So Leeds had a challenge around they wanted to understand how new technology can help impact the maintenance of their properties, but importantly, how it can improve health and well-being outcomes. So we've got a number of sensors and connected fire alarms which monitor these conditions and provide insights on, for example, indoor air quality, condensation, damp and mould. And what we've proposed is up to 1,000 homes, deploying 1,000 homes across their stock. They've got about 55,000 homes under their management at the moment, where we're putting these sensors in and working very closely with residents to understand how that data is useful for them, how is it useful for the landlord to, again, have any interventions or help those residents look after their properties better. It's really exciting because it involves a broad range of stakeholders within Leeds. So any people from housing management, public health, the residents themselves, and also the data and innovation department as well. We've also got a number of universities helping us locally. So the University of York are undertaking an evaluation of the project. I think that's really important to understand the impact that we're having, and also some public health professionals from the University of Leeds.
Okay. No, it sounds like a really exciting project, Luke. Why is this project specifically so important?
Well, health and well-being is a huge agenda, and poor quality housing costs the NHS around 1.4 billion a year. One part of that is around indoor air quality, for example. So getting people to understand a bit more around their indoor air quality, whether it's temperature, humidity or CO2, could have quite a big impact on their health, whether it's asthma or conditions like COPD. So why I think the project is important is that I think it will create awareness amongst residents around those environmental conditions and the effects on their well-being. From a company point of view, we want to develop our resident app so it can help create that awareness, but also provide that guidance and recommendations so that it enables people to look after their health and their properties better.
And it definitely sounds like you're tackling some big issues there. I know people are spending a lot more time at home now, and health is obviously more on the agenda than ever before. The project's been running for a few months to date. How's progress going so far?
Fantastic. We've had a number of projects previous to Leeds. They've all gone really well, but Leeds has really motored along, has gone so smoothly, and we've got such a great response from residents. So we asked for volunteers, and just one email out, and we got more than enough to fill the numbers that we were looking for. So, and they're all really engaged. They're asking questions, they're feeding back. So I think it's gone really well, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was great to be at your offices last week. I know the guys were up on site up in Leeds, and we were able to be at the office and see the properties come online and the data start feeding through. Once the sensors have been in for some time, what are you expecting to see? What results from the offset are you expecting?
Yeah, so from my point of view, the biggest thing that we're looking to get out of the project is the development of the resident app. So what we're looking to get is potential risk indicators being presented to those residents and also to the landlord, and then understanding what sort of behaviour change is that helping to facilitate. And if there are no impacts, how can we sort of tailor those recommendations, those alerts, those notifications? Who do they need to go to when to have greatest impact? So from my point of view, and this is particularly where the universities come into their own really, is to really understand, get that body of evidence around how environmental conditions impact people's health, and then the sustained behaviour change that could potentially lead to through our solution.
Oh, that's great. I know there's a lot of different stakeholders involved with this project, and the lead from Leeds City Council is a guy called Steven Blackburn. I've met him previously at different events, but I know you've spent more time with him. I don't know if you want to give us a bit of a background to Steven. So
Steven's a great guy, knows his stuff around smart cities, and is a real advocate for new technologies, and particularly how that can generate the data to have a data-led decision-making in the council, but also how they empower citizens. So I spent around 15-20 minutes one afternoon talking to Steven about the project, around their smart city strategy, and then specifically going into the project and its impacts, and that's what we've got coming up right now. Welcome everyone. I'm joined here today by Steven Blackburn, the Data and Innovation Manager at Leeds City Council. We've been working very closely with Leeds City Council on a major project deploying up to 1,000 homes with environmental sensors and connected fire alarms. Steven, welcome.
Hi Luke, good to be here.
Brilliant. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. I heard on the radio this morning that we're 60 days into the third lockdown, so 2/3 of the way through, so hopefully the light really is at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, fingers crossed. So what we're going to talk about today is very much around the project that we've been working on together. But firstly, I really want to get a sense of your actual overall smart city approach. So can you tell me a bit more about that, please?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so what we've done in Leeds, our Smart Leeds programme is broken into two parts. So first of all, our foundations. So these are really the building blocks, I suppose, that really any smart town, city, place needs in place, really. So the foundations that we focus on are world-class connectivity. So we're rolling out a gigabit fibre network across over 1,400 council buildings, schools, and NHS buildings. We're rolling out a LoRaWAN network that will enable IoT devices to be deployed, and we're rolling out more free Wi-Fi in community spaces as well. So lots of different connectivity options there for us, and also in the future we'll be working with BT and OpenReach on some 5G work in the city centre as well. So that's connectivity. We're also focusing on data and analytics. Obviously, new technology, IoT in particular, enables us to collect real-time data, much more data than we've ever been able to collect previously. But we then need to be able to manage that data appropriately. We need to be able to make the right decisions based on that, interpret it, present that in a way that we can, like I say, improve outcomes, deliver our services in new and innovative ways. And then finally, we're focusing on digital inclusion. So we have one of the largest digital inclusion programs in the UK. So that includes a tablet lending scheme where we're deploying lending tablets to people in communities, get them online, wraparound training and support that goes with that. But I would also say, whilst that is that program is very much focused on people who are traditionally never been online or very rarely go online, I do think there's a bigger piece of work really that we need to be focusing on increasingly in the future, and that's general skills for all of us. Technology is forever moving on, and people that are in school today are likely to be in jobs that haven't even been invented yet. Those of us that are in work at the moment, we might be using new technology in 5 years' time. So we need to advance our skills as well. So there's a broader piece of work there as well, I think. And then, of course, I would also throw in collaboration. Our Smart Leeds program isn't just a Leeds City Council program. It is a city program, so it's about working with others as well. So those are our foundations, and then our priority areas. I would say not necessarily say limited to, but the main focus for us is health and well-being, housing standards, climate emergency, and also travel and transport mobility. So those are our focus areas as well, and projects going on in all of those areas.
That sounds really interesting, and it sounds like a really robust approach. You mentioned, with collecting data in different ways using new technologies. What's your sort of sense in terms of data ethics and approach to ethics around the innovation that you're doing?
Certainly we take a human-centered approach to everything that we do. The whole point, really, we are a public organisation delivering public services, so it's very much got anything that we do has very much got to be focused around the customer, delivering the right services, tailored services to the right people, and engaging our customers. Involving those people in the discussions that we're having in the projects that we're working on. And of course, from our point of view as well, it's about it's as much of that we're working with the right companies who have the same ethical values that the council has. So on the one hand, it's about doing things in the right way, but then of course part of that is how we manage the data. And increasingly we'll be collecting more and more data. We may be working with more third parties in the future, and I do think there's perhaps an element of in the general public maybe at the moment of sort of data skepticism. Things being in the news, who's collecting my data, what are they doing with it, where's it going, and I think really that's no different for the council, that's no different for any organization. I do think that we need to have a proper, detailed, constructive conversation with our citizens, with our customers. And I think we need to have that very basic level of data trust, that our customers know that if the council is working with X company or doing something with new technology, that they have that very basic level of trust, that they know that the data that we're collecting will be managed appropriately, the people that we're working with have the same ethical values as the council, and ultimately what we're trying to do is deliver the best services that we can for them, for our customers. If we don't have that basic level of trust, then we need to have conversations over and over again, and and have that almost build that sort of foundation layer each time. And what's really good with the projects that we're involved in with HomeLINK is that part of that project, a big part of that project, is actually speaking to tenants, understanding what the challenges are from their point of view. How do they feel about new technology? How do they feel about a new device, a new gadget in their home, collecting data that hasn't been collected before? So this is a real good project to open those doors to those conversations with our customers.
Excellent. And I think, well, you mentioned collaboration before as well. I think that's also an element of trust, actually, and as you described, sort of working with people rather than something being done to them. But also in the same vein of collaboration, I believe you're in Leeds, you're looking at an innovation hub. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So, very much like we a similar project. Really, we will be focusing on similar projects to that that we're working with HomeLINK on. So the GovTech challenge project, where the challenge that we've set is how can we better use technology, to improve our council properties, include our council homes, that in turn improve health outcomes of our tenants. If you live in a good standard quality of accommodation, then your health and well-being is likely to be improved as well. And the process that we're going through there, working with Government Digital Service, is one that we're wanting to replicate and look at other challenges as well at the Innovation Hub. So, number one, how do we identify the right challenges to focus on? And then who are the stakeholders that we need to bring into that conversation? Of course, customers, absolutely fundamental. Who are the other partners that might help us on those particular civic challenges as well? And then ultimately, I guess from our point of view, get a better understanding of how different technology that is already out there can help us address those challenges, or how might we work with partners to co-design and co-produce or tweak solutions that already exist. To help us address those problems, those city challenges that we face. And through that learning, through that research and development, and through that knowledge, that can then help us potentially access funding and write the business case. That might be internal council funding, perhaps. It might be applying for government funding. But ultimately, what we want to do at the Innovation Hub, through working on these challenges, is how do we then scale, and how do we deliver those solutions right across the city? This isn't about us, and that's the approach we're taking with GovTech. This is not about us working on pilot after pilot after pilot. My experience is if you call something a pilot, it probably will end up being a pilot. But if you say our focus is, this is the challenge, how do we address it and how do we scale? That's one eye on the prize. How do we ultimately deliver this at scale right across the district of Leeds? Then if we know the direction of travel, then we will, more likely to make it so. And the idea with the Innovation Hub is very much the same, like I said, we've done with GovTech. Focus on a pipeline of challenges, work with different and relevant stakeholders, including members of the public, and then deliver improved outcomes and improved services to our customers right across the district.
Excellent. And in terms of, you sort of touched upon this a little bit already, but in terms of housing, because obviously Leeds City Council has 50-60,000 properties that they manage and own. Can you tell us a bit more how that specifically fits into that wider approach and strategy? And then maybe at the same time, specifically the Smart Healthy Home project that we're doing with you as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, we've got 56,000 council properties, so we are the largest landlord in the city. We regard ourselves as a responsible landlord, so we want our housing accommodation to be the best possible standard that it can be. As you can imagine, 56,000 properties is a lot to manage, and occasionally, some of those properties need repairs. And often those repairs are perhaps perhaps reactive, and it might be that perhaps a tenant doesn't approach us, contact us with a particular problem until it's become more of a major issue. That might sometimes lead to tenants being rehoused while we sort the problem out. That's disruptive for them. So how can we use technology to be more proactive, to really understand what is going on in those properties? And if we can get real-time data, real-time information, then we can be more proactive. So if we're taking, for example, temperature data, humidity, might be CO2 or carbon monoxide or any of that kind of data. It might be managing the boiler, or managing some of the equipment in the property. If we can understand what is going on in real time, and we can maybe see a slight deterioration in the property, then we can maybe take preventative action, which might be a small, at that point, it might be a much smaller and cheaper repair than leaving something further down the line when it becomes a much more expensive problem, not just in terms of the cost for the council, but in terms of the upheaval for the tenant as well. So technology potentially really enables us to be a much more proactive organisation, much more proactive housing service, which is, it's cheaper for the council, much more cost-effective service for the council to run, and much less disruptive for the tenant, and enables them to live in that really high quality standard of accommodation that we strive to achieve. So, but of course, as you're absolutely right. I mentioned it earlier. There are obviously then the health benefits there as well. You live in a good quality accommodation. You're not just your general health, but your whole well-being, your mental health is likely to be improved as well. If you're living in somewhere that's really damp and and not a very nice place to live in, then the wider the wider societal kind of implications in terms of health costs to the wider healthcare and all the rest of it, then a lot of it is focused on the home. And if you're happy and you're healthy and you're living in a good quality accommodation, then there's wider benefits to society as well.
And I think, obviously with recent events, that's really highlighted to pretty much everyone, I think, how important your home environment is, seeing as people have been spending so much time there lately. And I think it has really pushed up the agenda on politically and functionally in terms of just how you manage your properties. I think there's a real focus on that now. Thanks, Stephen. And in terms of just going back to sort of the collaboration bit as well, but specifically on this project, what I found really impressive is the amount of stakeholders within Leeds City Council, but also your partners that are involved and really engaged with this. Can you just sort of go over how you've engaged those stakeholders, who they are, why they're interested?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of my role is to promote Leeds as a city where we want to promote Leeds as a city of innovation. We want to work with partners such as yourselves to work on these new innovative solutions that can ultimately drive improved services for our customers. And if we can work with people such as yourself to co-produce solutions, at the end of the day, when it comes to looking at the procurement process, and what we were just talking about with the innovation hub, if we can co-produce a solution with you that is a bit of a no-brainer then when it comes to procurement because it ticks all the boxes, then I think that's the right approach to go with. But you're right, in terms of collaboration, stakeholder engagement, that is not just the IT guys or the techie people working with you or with any other partner. That's about us co-designing, co-producing those solutions together with customers, as we've mentioned, and with those who are delivering the services. And we've all got the same ends here, and I have to say, this isn't all about technology and all about data. That is an enabler. This is about how do we improve outcomes for our customers and our citizens. That is what anybody in the council is striving to achieve, no matter what department or what service they work in. And technology and better understanding, better use of data can enable that, and our services, are keen to get involved in any of these kind of projects to improve the service that they deliver and improve the outcomes of their customers. So yeah, on the GovTech Challenge project, it's been really great that we've got public health colleagues, we've got adult social care colleagues, we've got housing, and there are two parts to housing. You've got the sort of the bricks and mortar side, and you've also got the tenant engagement side as well. So we've got multiple stakeholders all sat around the table working with suppliers such as yourselves, all ultimately looking at how do we improve outcomes for our tenants. And I think that is absolutely the right approach to take. And as I've mentioned, the approach that we'll be taking with other civic challenges around the Innovation Hub going forward as well.
And being on the other side of it, Stephen, I think it's very refreshing having those multiple stakeholders involved, and the commitment of some of your colleagues as well, really impressive. One thing I've also been really impressed with is actually the response from residents initially to actually volunteering to having some of this technology in their homes. We've had sort of similar things from other projects, but this one is really, on a different scale, and I've been really impressed by that. Why do you think some of your residents are really keen to get involved with this project?
I think we've got good tenant engagement overall. I mean, there's obviously clearly, we can always do better, but I think on the whole, I think there is good tenant engagement, and we're also working with some of this engagement is through local community groups as well. So you may have spoken, for example, to the COPD, the Breathe Easy group. So people who are focusing on a particular area, it might be dementia friendly cafes or whatever. There's lots of these groups exist and take place across the city, and I think working working with those groups and really understanding the challenges that they face as customers from their side. If they can see that you're working with the council ultimately to improve the service collectively that is delivered to them, I've found that to some degree you're pushing at an open door. I think it's going about it in the right way. We can't just rock up, like I said earlier, with a new gadget and expect tenants and customers to accept what we're doing. For quite some time we've often said we can't do to people, we have to do with people, and I think speaking to them, having an open conversation in the groups, in the community groups that exist already, through the tenant engagement groups that we have already, through the tenant newsletter, speaking to people and encouraging them to get involved in this work, because ultimately what we want to do is work together, and that they benefit from this. This isn't about us just rocking up with some new technology. This is us working with them. And I think that approach is absolutely the right approach to take.
No, I completely agree with that approach. It's really refreshing as well. Well, thanks for your time today, Stephen. Really appreciate it. I realise everyone in government at the moment is very busy dealing with the impact of COVID, and just really appreciate you taking some time out of your day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really good to speak to you today, Luke. Thanks very much.
Hi, that was a great interview, Luke. It's really great to hear how passionate Stephen is about this project.
Indeed, and for me, it's really impressive how much emphasis they put on housing in their smart city strategy, and I think that the project is testament to that.
Perfect. So that's it for episode 1. Join us again soon, where we've got a couple of experts from academia joining us here.
Indeed. So we've got Alison Wallace from the University of York, and we've got Maria Horn the University of Leeds. So Maria is a public health professional and got a huge insight into the well-being agenda, health and well-being agenda. And Alison is from the Centre of Sustainable Policy at the University of York, and she's got a broad range of knowledge in terms of housing. So from fuel poverty to maintenance issues to sort of tenant engagement. So it's going to be a really interesting episode next episode.
Fantastic. Thank you, Luke. Thank you.
Thank you. See you then.
Bye-bye.
It was great to hear from Steven Blackburn at Leeds City Council talking about their smart building project. Smart buildings are a thing of the future, and Leeds are really leading the way with this, along with HomeLINK and Aico. Stay tuned to find out more about how this project progresses through Aico TV, our social media and the website. Now we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with you shortly.
Introducing the SmartLink Gateway and Cloud Portal service from Aico. A new and innovative product developed with registered social landlords and housing associations, giving you complete control and reassurance when monitoring and maintaining your stock of alarms through SmartLink Cloud Portal. Easy to set up, the gateway is a roaming 2G GSM-based device, ensuring maximum connectivity possible without the need for local broadband or Wi-Fi services, increasing efficiency while remaining compliant with legislation. Featuring real-time alarm status, fault status, text alert and email notification capability for both fire or CO and fault events, as well as installation reports and replacement and fault reports. The SmartLink Gateway and Cloud Portal service is your total solution for alarm maintenance and asset management. The smarter way to check your tenant safety at any time. SmartLink, a revolution in tenant safety.
Welcome back. So now we're going to go ahead and watch part 3 of the Sparky Ninja mini-series. So we've got David Watts back with us once again, speaking to our Regional Specification Managers, Andy Sturgess and Carl Traynor. This week, then they're going to be looking at communal areas and things like emergency lighting and all things electrical. So let's go over to them now and see the episode.
Hi there, this is Andy Sturgess from Aico. Here for another episode, having a chat with Dave Watts from Sparky Ninja. With his exceptional branded hat. I want a hat. Can I have a hat, Dave? And Carl Traynor, our resident pet electrician here at Aico. So just a bit of an introduction to him if you haven't seen any of the other episodes. Dave's a third generation electrician, former QS ops manager for some London electrical contractors, now in the training sector for the last 10 years or so. Run Sparky Ninja. Logo. I've decided I want one of those hats now. And he's a founding member of the E5 group. So at some point in these, we'll let you give a bit of an introduction as to what E5 is as well, Dave.
Sure.
For people who want to know about it. And obviously his key role here is, to support and educate electricians and inform them of the future of the electrical industry. We've also got Carl, who's a 30+ year time-served electrician, predominantly in the social housing sector. In the Liverpool area, not that you could tell from his accent.
You'd never ever tell, would you?
and then before he moved across to Aico, the last 11 years he was spent as an electrical manager, working for different social housing providers, and he is part of the Electrical Safety Roundtable, and basically helped write the code of practice. So today's discussion, we're going to talk about emergency lighting, and more specifically, emergency lighting in communal areas, in domestic dwellings. Is it required, but more importantly, what would you class as a communal area, and where would you kind of bring the requirements for emergency lighting in? Are there certain heights you'd use, certain types of buildings, certain layouts? Because I see a lot of dwellings where you've got, it might only be 2 stories, but they're massive sprawling buildings with loads of corridors, different layouts, loads of fire doors in the way. The escape routes might be a bit confusing for someone who's not lived there very long. For example, would you base a communal area on height, or would you base it on the amount of people living in the property, and in the building, for example? On that note, I'll hand you over to probably Dave's probably a good place to start on this one.
I guess first, this is the main question really is, are we thinking about, property that's multiple occupancy where we've got properties that are converted to self-contained flats with one central area? Are we looking at hostels? Because there's such a variety of different property types, and we need to consider the differences between those two. I mean, let's say, for example, let's say I live somewhere, and every day I go into this property and I go up maybe 2 flights of stairs and stuff. Does that mean at 3 o'clock in the morning, if there's a fire or anything, that I would not need lighting to aid my escape? Is there a risk factor? Do I know blindly what the escape route is? You know, and I think this is the kind of question we try and draw a line and either go one side or the other, but we need to really think about what the event would be like. And it's like I've tried, even like with the premature collapse thing, which is another whole area, trying to think what the event is like to then reflect on what lighting would be needed. You know,
I mean, personally, back in the day, I mean, I've done urban search and rescue courses and things like that, and no matter what you're doing, if you haven't got any light, then it's confusing. So there's even if you've lived there for 10 years and you know the layout of the building at the back of your hand, you know, in a bit of panic, and you know, when there's stuff going on, your brain just forget things. So I mean, in my opinion, it's very much got to be based on more, you know, lay out the amount of occupants in the dwelling, the amount of flats, the potential. I mean, how easy it is to actually get out. I mean, the thing you can never guarantee is that everyone in the building knows the escape route, which is the other thing you've got to consider as well.
You could have people stopping over.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, that's the risk. The important thing is that your risk assessment is constantly fluid. It's constantly changing. So let's say you carried out a risk assessment on, let's say, some of the small low-rise blocks. We've seen them everywhere. It's predominant through social housing. So the little ones where there's 3 flats on the ground floor, there's 3 flats above, that type of thing. And you could look at it, and as Dave said quite rightly there, maybe you've lived there for 10 or 20 years and you go up and down them stairs all the time, but then you put in the stress factors of smoke or panicking trying to get other people out or your dog out or whatever it is, that plays a part. But as I quite often refer to this when I'm doing the training, we're talking about risk assessments for smoke alarms, you could look at it and go, well, you're fit and healthy, you're on the top floor, if push comes to shove, you could jump out the window if you needed to, just for argument's sake, let's say you said that. And you've done that risk assessment this morning, and then that person goes and plays 5-a-side tonight, and if they're anything like me, a complete liability.
Rolling the ankle, that was me.
Very quick on the wing, getting the balls over, but breaks their ankle. That risk assessment's just changed. But in that situation, they're not going to ring up the housing to tell them that, are they? Or, you know, the tenant, the mum's a bit poorly, we'll move in with us for a week and we'll keep an eye on you. That type of thing. And it's a constantly fluid thing. So to me, you always have to look at the worst case scenario with these.
Yeah, I mean, I think a worst case, my son, boy in his class, this is probably when he was 6 or 7. Just 2 or 3 rows of houses down from me. His mum was working in a pub, and obviously, thankfully the son was had a nanny over. But mum came home, nanny went home, and mum decided at 3 a.m. to make some chips for herself, and she fell asleep. And unfortunately, she died from smoke inhalation that night. But the young lad, alone in house with mum, you know, tried to find a way to get help. And little children need that extra light and extra help, especially if they're in a big building, they can't just go outside. And thankfully, he was able to go across to the neighbour in the lobby, and he could hit the doorbell. He could actually he could see around and get, you know. And he now lives with Nanny just over the road from me, and you know, he's doing really, really well. But it's amazing how close things can be, and something as simple as, you know, assuming that parents are always fit and healthy.
You can't do that.
It's very bad oversight.
You cannot. You absolutely cannot do that. And that is it comes up quite often. I mean, you got the likes of towel blocks, and it's just, well, that's an obvious one. Of course, there's emergency lighting. Well, yeah, of course, it's a towel block. But then, where do you draw that line? You know, I've worked where the 3-story blocks, and I guess what's 9 flats. Is it a towel block? No, but it's still multiple occupancy. You've got a lot of families in there. You've got a lot of people in there. You've got
I used to live one of those.
Stone steps. In an emergency, you're trying to find your way out. For me, absolutely, there should be a degree of emergency lighting in there. Absolutely, there should be.
As installers, I mean, what's your what's your the best guidance document? Is there anything that actually, gives you advice in regards to this, or is it very much a, recommendation based on experience and what you think what you think you should do in regards to the situation? Is there anything set in stone? Is there anything that points you in the right direction?
I mean, regulations 560 will tell me that emergency lighting shall. There'll be a mention of that. I'll get the regulation out. That's my starting point as an electrician designing.
It's a 5266.
Yeah. It says emergency lighting systems shall comply. So this is much like the same discussion we had before, where we talked about 5839. It says 5266 and 1838. So that's my starting point. I've now been put into that territory of, right, now what do I do? I now have to review 5266 and I have to look at it. I mean, again, manufacturers give so much information and help with this. Yeah. I remember when I started making courses and I started doing emergency lighting courses, manufacturers and iCell and similar had so much resource and information available. Things like points of emphasis, disability glare, and then they push me even further, lux levels. And I go around and even going to commercial industrial sites now, I go, when do you have your emergency lighting tested? Oh, well, we test it during the day. I says, and do you discharge the batteries during the daytime? Yeah. Okay. And are you occupied work property at nighttime? Yes. And are your batteries up to the job now? Oh, no. And are the lux levels verified where you have no borrowed light? Oh, no. So there's an awful lot. Again, I always go back to training because there's an awful lot more progress that we need to do for people doing something as simple as emergency lighting maintenance. And that reflects on design. Consideration of what would happen. Again, I go back to the case of role play. I like to try to role play as much as I can so that I actually put myself in a situation of what could happen. And even if I am on a 2-story property, if there is a situation where I may not be able-bodied, I may not be physically able to get out, do I stay put? Do I try to get out? Do I need any aid for that? I see it in so many times in the commercial where electricians or engineers will go up to a mezzanine level, up a little ladder. And I go, right, you go up. And there was actually one case I was doing a course and I said, right, what's your rescue plan? And one of the guys in the room said, well, actually, a few years ago, I did kind of fall asleep up there from the leakage of the refrigerant. And he woke up 3 or 4 hours later. And he said he didn't say anything. Wow. I said, well, there's a load of questions that I don't want to ask now. Let's move.
I didn't expect this question to get this answer. I'm not particularly happy with it right now.
But this is the point. We've got to think about what could happen, what could happen when. And that's why you'll see emergency lighting always in your switch rooms, in your services. We've also got to think about the occupiers, the people utilizing the properties. And at the point of time where it's very different, and that's when it's maybe in the middle of the night, you have very little borrowed light from the sun, and maybe when it's on fire, you have lots of smoke and you can't see where you're going. Familiarity is a key as well. You could bolt this onto a risk, your fire risk assessment. They need to work together.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the conversations I have quite a lot in regards to, like, say, it's back to 539 Part 6, but in regards to the requirements for LD1 systems. Now, a lot of people just think, oh, LD1 system, it's because the risk is higher. Whereas it's like, well, no, it's not because the risk is higher, it's because you need earliest warning to give you the most time to get out. And that's, for example, in the update, Airbnbs and short-term lets, they added that in there, LD1. Well, why is it LD1? Well, you're not going to go on holiday and deliberately set your holiday house on fire, are you? It's not because of that. It's because you're unfamiliar with the building. You need as much time as possible.
Exactly. Whenever I do the training, I mean, I love going up the mountain. Stick me on a mountain, I'm happy. And you go up to Aviemore and I go to Snowdonia, and a lot of time you stay in these Airbnbs or these little lodges and that. I'm not being funny. What do any of us do when you first get there? You throw your bags in and then you open your first beer, don't you? You don't look and go, okay, if a fire happens, how do I get out of here later on?
It's not just that. It's the case of if you've got say, for example, you're a group of mates, one of you goes in and locks the door, where's the key?
Yeah.
It's do you know where it is?
Yeah, absolutely,
So there's all sorts of things to consider like that. And and fundamentally, it's going to be the same with emergency lighting, isn't it? It's one of those, if there's going to be the potential that somebody's going to be in that building who's unfamiliar with it, they need to be able to see to get out of the building.
Yeah. Earliest warning and be able to see to get out as well. Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. And the other side of it as well is, is how much emphasis is put on to knowing what an evacuation plan is. I tend to find that if you go into we go into a lot of tower blocks, don't we, Carl?
Yeah.
I mean, even in tower blocks, the evacuation plan isn't particularly obvious to you, is it, when you walk in there?
And then And then once they're out, where do they go? Where's the area? Is there lighting there? Is it actually private property? Is it council land? And then you've got the permissions with all of that. There's a lot to it. But good planning. And then that plan, obviously, it's just like a risk assessment at the end of the day when it's delivered. It's got to be redone. It's got to be reassessed regularly. Just in case there are changes of ownership, changes of occupancy. Maybe the neighbours have changed and that area that was considered as a suitable place has now been filled with skips or other waste. You never know. And these as you said earlier, these are fluid documents, and we have to constantly pick them up and revise them.
Definitely. But no, I think there's quite a lot of food for thought there. I mean, again, if you want to learn more, it's all down to doing a bit of research by yourself. And to be honest with you, what I find a lot of the time as well, it's fundamentally down to just being a bit observant and using a bit of common sense. In a lot of these situations, I think a lot of people just get too caught up into what's the minimum I need to do. Do I actually, and it's not a case of them wanting to neglect people living in the buildings. It's just that because they're busy or whatever it is they do, they just want to churn it out. They want to get it done.
What can I just do to tick a box? What I did in the past, a few years back, the team I was managing were asked to then test communal areas, and prior to that we'd never been asked to do it before. Obviously some of them did have emergency lighting, and the team were a little bit sort of reticent about it, going, well, we haven't really done any of this before. I approached one of the local colleges and said, look, we don't want to do the full course on emergency lighting because we're not actually installing it. There was a separate contractor that used to install those, but we are going to be going in and doing EICRs on communal areas. So can you just give us a basic of, this is an overview, this is what you should be looking for, this is what you should do. And they were more than happy to do that. And we literally just done a day. So we just done one full day. I said, just do a bespoke. There wasn't like a test or an exam or anything at the end of it, but just an overview of, this is what you'll be doing, this is what you need to look for. And split them into two groups. And half went one day and half went a different day, and done that. And come back and like, yeah, we're fine with that now, we're happy with that. And that's what you can do. If but nobody knows everything. So and that's
people say this to me.
I need to go and I'll go and look at that. Don't be embarrassed about it. Nobody knows everything.
People say this to me a lot. They say, I just wish that they'll watch what I do. They'll look at the E5 stuff, and then they'll be frustrated with themselves for not being able. I said, you do know that we did 48 hours or more of grinding research for that little bit. And then the next week we were doing something else.
That's it.
And it's not about being a master at one. It's about being good at everything. And then what you do is, like with competence, is you have to be competent relative to the nature of the work to undertake. So if I'm about to do some work, I will then reflect on my ability to do that work. I'll then read up, I'll then reflect on it, I'll do some CPD on it, and I'll develop my knowledge on that. But then 3 weeks time, I might be somewhere completely different. And it's about doing a little bit about a lot of things. And that's the way that, and a lot of electricians do kick themselves for not knowing so much about so many little things. It's about knowing where to go to get that information when you need it, and then bin it when you don't need it.
So knowing where the right thing. Whenever I do the expert installer training, and I always say, like I say, it's been an eye-opener doing this job of the different levels that people know. Again, no disrespect to anyone at all. And I always say to them, look, we're going to be going through part 6, BS 5839 part 6. If you're not aware of part 6 before, you've not come across it before, and some haven't, don't be ashamed of that at all. First time I came across it was getting an NIC registration, and the guy coming in to assess me went, so you're installing smoke alarms, aren't you? We'd only just started on the job, so we'd only been there about 2 months, and we were getting registered. I went, putting at the time it was LD3, just hauling land, and he went, so he shows you a copy of part 6 then. And I picked up the regs book and went to part 6, went to and he went, no, you copy of part 6. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. and genuinely, that was like, you need to get hold of this and you need to do that. And then I looked into it and went, oh, right, so this is LD3. That's why because I'd always been taught on site, you put an alarm upstairs, you put an alarm downstairs, and you interlink them. That's it. That's the sum total of what I was told. There's 2 different types. At the time, we used to put ionisation upstairs. Obviously, you don't really fit them now. But at the time, 2 different alarms, because there's different types of fires, and you're like, that makes sense to me, and off you went.
I think in the last 20 years or so, maybe 15 years, what with Part P coming through, the electricians' understanding on building regulations has been forced upon them, and then we look at approved document B, which has some information, but it still falls behind 5839 quite regularly. doesn't keep up with 5839.
No.
And then the books are published to the building regulations. And so again, electricians, it is a bit like a minimum level.
Yeah.
And that can affect what they do, their detailed technical understanding of 5839. And, building regulations needs to keep up a bit quicker, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's more, to be fair, it does reference it pretty obviously.
References it.
But it's one of those cases of, well, to get it signed off Part P, just got to comply with this document. There we go. See you later, mate. And then that's basically where you end up on it.
Yeah.
But well, no, that's been a very interesting discussion. I mean, happy with a decent conclusion to that. So again, thanks for listening, everyone. Hopefully it was interesting to you, and we will catch you again for another episode in the near future.
Bye-bye.
Thank you again to David for joining us for the Sparky Ninja mini-series. He's going to be back for the final time next week. Right now we're going to go over to another break, and we're going to be looking at our 3000 series.
Welcome back to Aico TV. Our next segment is going to look at Cratus Communications. Our relationship manager, Tina Mistry, had the pleasure of interviewing Nick Kilby and Rob Chilton, talking about Cratus Communications and everything they do to support Aico. Let's take a look.
Nick and Rob, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, I'm Nick Kilby of Cratus Communications.
Rob?
I'm Rob. I work in Cratus Communications as well, and I'm helping Aico directly.
What do Cratus do?
Well, look, Cratus is a communications public affairs agency that specialises in the world of local government, local public sector. So we provide planning communications for the development sector, community engagement and building for the built environment and local authorities. We do public affairs for both commercial interests and for local government. developing people's positioning, understanding with each other, as well as to national government. We do public relations and crisis comms. And the final bit of the equation for us is we also advise and work with local authorities on how to deliver their political message in the most efficient manner, working and turning the relationship between the officers and members into high-performing teams. That's what we do.
But you've got a vast amount of expertise, haven't you? I mean, Rob, your background's really interesting in itself.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been a councillor for the past 11 years, and I was the mayor, ceremonial mayor for 18 months. I've been on a planning committee for 5 years. It's a real rough and tumble local government, and it doesn't half prepare you for all kinds of eventualities. But of course, that means, you know, we've got a lot of either councillors, ex-officers, various people in Cratus, which enables us to help people from both angles, really. So it is very useful.
And I think the expertise speaks for itself. I mean, we've worked with yourselves on quite a few things already. Yeah. I mean, is there anything else you want to add in terms of why was Cratus created? And what was the whole purpose of Cratus being put together?
Well, I'm very passionate about local government being the Cinderella. It's so overlooked. It gets cost shunted from government. It never gets properly funded. The public write to their MP before they write to their councillor because they've lost the understanding of what local government does for them. And it does tremendous amounts. It's beyond the bins, beyond sweeping the streets. If you need help and you're older, adult services are the most amazing group of people who will be there for you, will adapt your house so you can live there longer. If you've got a child that needs extra help, or God forbid, a child finds themselves without parents, it is the children's services that step in and become that parent. And that's an amazing, absolute humbling side of local government. And people just don't get how big it is. The most you ever really get involved in local government is when someone wants planning permission right next door to you and you get a little upset about it, and then suddenly you find where the council offices are. But the role of local government in supporting the community, I think, is just brilliant. And so Cratus was, it came out of that personal love that I had and a desire to raise the profile and to improve the way that everyone talked and worked with each other. I sometimes succeed, and sometimes I wish I'd never started that journey. But on the other hand, you've got to have some good times and some bad times, haven't you?
I think it is quite different from a local authority housing association perspective, isn't it? I come back from a local government background, working in two larger Met councils, and that sense of pride, you know, that when you work with a local authority, you're serving your customers, regardless of what tenure, you're actually there to give back to the community and to genuinely make a difference. I think that's quite a big passion, isn't it, for everybody that serves in local government?
I think so, but I think that one of the things when I was a councillor, and I was only a councillor for 4 years, what I discovered is that the pressure put upon local government to deliver quality services for less all the time makes it pretty challenging if you want a career. And you know, we hear about the headlines of how much chief executives may get paid or may not, but the groundwork of the person dealing with the clients, that's not massively paid, and it's probably more in line with the NHS. And I think that sometimes I wish that we appreciated the people around us a little bit more, because when we were clapping for the NHS, for which I totally supported it, I was also clapping for those people in the local government world who had transformed services to feed those that weren't allowed out, they were shielding. And that came from nowhere, and it was brilliantly done by people who are just as dedicated as people in the NHS, in my opinion.
And would you say is the difference from looking at it from a working and serving the community from a local authority perspective to a housing association perspective?
Well, there shouldn't be, actually. Both are, you know, have got the most privileged job of making sure that everyone is safe in their homes. You know, the Duncan Selby, who ran Public Health England for a long time, said, you know, there are three things. If you can give someone three things, they will be good, they will not feel ill, they won't use the NHS much. One of them is give them a home, give them a job, and then give them someone to care about. And if you're dealing with one of those, which is giving someone a home, it's a precious thing that you should be enjoying the role, whichever world you're in. I think that sometimes housing associations have a sense more freer than the local government, because the housing department is part of the overall picture, and therefore sometimes I think they feel pressured as every part of local government. At least with a housing association, they're not always at the government's beck and call, and maybe they don't get so much hassle from the councillors.
We'll come back to that point shortly. We're entered into a partnership with yourselves. We're doing some great work, aren't we? I know, Rob, there's some exciting things that we're doing with yourselves. I know we entered this partnership. It's coming to a year, over a year.
Yeah.
And it's been really enjoyable. Rob, do you want to tell us a bit more about the work we're doing together and what your thoughts are on it?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, to sort of add to what Nick said, part of the issue that local government faces is that it's, as well as a lack of awareness amongst the public as to the role of local government, there's also a degree of lack of awareness and appreciation sometimes amongst large organisations, companies, developers, housing associations, who don't know, you know, how to relate to local government, how to work with them. And, you know, that's, as I say, that's something that Cratus specialises in liaising with these organisations and advising them on the best approach. So obviously the work that we're doing with yourselves at the moment is to try and draw together all of these, so many organisations, anyone with a stake in housing, domestic housing, social housing particularly, to try and formulate a new housing safety task group, which you know, Tina will already have spoken of at length, and there will be more to come. This would of course be a non-partisan organisation, but its main function would be to lobby and to try and resolve some of these historic issues relating to, because fire safety standards and legislation is a mess across the country. It's a hodgepodge of various different laws and regulations and I mean different in England to Scotland and you name it. So, you know, Aico, obviously yourselves are trying to get this idea, this broader idea of drawing all that together and improving that so that every standard's on a level. And obviously we at Cratus are delighted to help out with that. And of course, I mean, don't we want to go into, Tina, we've got some research coming, which was quite exciting, because the research that we've commissioned from the CEBR it's the first time that that all of these fire incidences have been drawn together in one document, laid out statistically and with different laid out amongst the incidences for different demographic groups, different geographies, different local authorities, so that we can get a real picture and we can send that on to politicians and stakeholders of the scale of the problem across the country and why this standardisation is needed. So it's a real fascinating piece of work, and we're really, really delighted to be involved in it with yourselves.
I think it's been a pleasure working with yourselves. I think it's been lovely bouncing off. Almost we've both become an extension of each other's team. I speak to you, Rob, quite frequently. I think more than my husband some days. But but it's quite. But it's been delightful. And I mean, you're right. The stuff that we are doing is around that research. That research is going to be an amazing gift to the sector, and the Housing Safety Task Force that we're working on together will hopefully create those collaborative partnerships within the social housing sector, but equally out of the sector, right across all 4 nations. And to achieve something like that will be phenomenal in terms of supporting local government as well as housing associations, but across all 4 nations. Which will be interesting.
And Tina, for us, that's the difference in the working relationship, the partnership that you were talking about earlier on, that we're always looking for, that we're always aspiring it. So to find it with you has been brilliant, because it's not just about selling the product. You know, there are set marketing ways of doing that, but actually becoming a partner, becoming a contributor, a positive force within the sector in the way that you're seeking to do, I think is just so much more exciting and much more powerful. And the brand loyalty I think local government is very loyal when it finds people that are on its side and there for it. And I think that's what you're trying to be, and resolving the problem. And there will be some people who will sit in your presentations and meetings that Rob's setting up and go, we should have been doing this a long time ago. There's no point humiliating them. I think the way that you're doing it is allowing them to come along on the journey without feeling bad that they weren't on the journey before you. And I think that that's a relief for local government, because they are just inundated with pressure. And for you to come in and be this supportive, I think is just a tonic for them. It really is.
I think it's what we want to do. It's our gift back to the sector. The sector's such an exciting place to be. It changed so many lives of so many people, has an impact regardless of age, ethnicity, or where you geographically live. And I think all we want to do is give back. And working with yourselves has been delightful, because we both see the same vision. And we have open, transparent conversations about everything and anything in terms of how we can best support the sector. I think what we are creating together will be hopefully some sort of support.
But it's an interesting time in social housing, isn't it? That it's a buzzword. There's a housing crisis. Even though we've had a pandemic, the housing crisis has not gone away. The challenges to resolving the housing crisis, I think, have actually increased quite dramatically. And some of the issues that have come up when you've had lockdown and you've had no public amenity space, suddenly the idea of infilling lots of estates with additional housing, you start to balance out, can that really be achieved with keeping amenity space around blocks of flats? You want both, but certainly in London that will change a lot of thinking. The Hackett report is every housing association I speak to, every local authority housing manager tells me about what effect the Hackett report is having. Rightfully, no one's moaning about it. It's another issue that needs to be dealt with in real time. And then what's really taken me back is how huge the pressure will become in the next year to 18 months on decarbonisation and the expenditure. And all that money has to come from somewhere, and there is still a need simply for more numbers on top. So doing the right thing is going to be more and more challenging, and having people support local authorities in making those decisions is going to be more essential than it was before the pandemic. And that's before we get into how you work in some of the flats or have families of the numbers that are in them. So,
and resident engagement has become a massive aspect, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And you're right, there's 4 key agendas. We've got the housing crisis, we've got the social housing white paper out there, we've got building safety from Hackett to draft building safety bill, and the whole conversation around net zero and achieving targets by 2030, 2050. There are challenging times with social housing at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah, and at the moment, there's a lot of talk. I think that we really haven't got down to the detail of how some of it's going to be delivered, because there is no way that the developers, the house builders, will deliver all the housing that's required. They're delivering already a significant amount. They're already delivering a lot of the infrastructure required to unlock even more housing. Government has got Homes England, and that's certainly a very proactive organisation, and money is certainly flowing into big opportunities in London and outside with new communities. The housing associations, I think, do have a unique problem at the moment. They are standalone. They're sitting on their balance sheets. They have been actually quite significant drivers of new homes and new social homes in the last 5 years, more than people have realised, I think. But with the Hackett report and decarbonisation, they've only got a pot that is of a certain size, and they're now having to separate it out. So there could be a slowdown in delivering the homes numbers in the next few years, because where do you keep spending your money? And safety, your world, is at the top of the agenda, and rightly so, I think, for all the associations.
And I think it's interesting you mentioned the fact that there is that conflicting of priorities at the moment. Is what do you prioritise? Do you think there should be more of a holistic approach to safety, and that you can't deal with net zero one side and deal with building safety on the other, resident engagement on the other, and a housing crisis? Should we not have a holistic approach to what we're doing?
Well, I think that, you know, there's obviously a big story that we're not mentioning and talking about, and that's an ongoing public inquiry, and that will, like so many accidents and disasters and events, shape the whole of the social sector for many, many years to come. And I don't particularly want to preempt any of that, because each day something else comes out of the inquiry. I think that safety is now a guaranteed number one, can't move to number two until you've resolved that issue. And that there are, you know, as a councillor, I used to go and deliver leaflets and go and knock on doors in blocks of flats. And I used to get the lift, if it worked, all the way to the top, and I used to walk all the way down. And it never occurred to me then that leaseholders were changing the front doors, personalising their flats. It never crossed my mind. And therefore, I now remember seeing that sort of thing happening and thought that that was someone personalising their home as they wish. Now we've got to look at all those aspects of fire safety and in blocks and houses that have been divided into some leaseholders and some council owned or association owned. And I think that that's going to be the immediate pressure. I think when people can get back on site, making sure people are safe in their existing home will be the number one priority, and rightly so. I think that then has a knock-on effect. It will take the housing associations for a period of time out of being one of the main drivers of new social homes.
So you also, in terms of a holistic approach, do we all need to be looking at safety overall together?
We do, and we have to make safety non-negotiable. I think that that doesn't mean to say you pay whatever the suppliers say, but safety first has to be in there. And I think that councillors and local authorities will want that. And it's and to therefore bring everyone together, as you're trying to bring everyone together and get the best practice so that everyone is following the best way of working, dealing with all this sort of situation, is totally the right thing to do. People need to have confidence that they're doing the right thing for their residents and that they're not missing opportunities that they may regret later because they never knew or no one showed them. So you becoming this friend, this critical friend, as well as a supplier of solutions, I think is absolutely essential. I wouldn't want to be a housing manager. I wouldn't want to be the chief executive of a housing association. I've been talking to quite a few recently. It's a hell of a responsibility at this moment in time. And it clearly, I think that we're all going to find every local authority, every block of flats has drifted from its original safety integrity based on the era that it was built. And that is something that everyone will want to see corrected.
What key things are you seeing as key aspects of struggles that you're seeing from HAs and local authorities at the moment, apart from the aspect of prioritising of work? Are there any key things that you're seeing?
Yeah, well, we're certainly seeing people, we've just recently seen one housing association come to terms with the size of the problem that they have. And it's like people are getting to the point now where they know what the challenges are in their organisations, and they've been very nervous and quiet about them as they've tried to calmly review what the learning points are and how that impacts on their estate. Some housing associations have limited effect because of the stock. Those that took over the 50s, the 60s and the 70s blocks of flats in the urban and built up areas, they're the ones who have really got lots because it's dealing with the cladding as well as the internal integrity. So we're just starting to see some very big announcements from housing associations saying we've got over 100 units that need improvement.
Would you say so if looking at it from politically as well, from externally and internally, are there challenges internally HA and local authorities have to overcome? I mean, we talked about this massive thing about culture change and change of mindset. What are your thoughts on that within internal of an organisation, and also how that is delivered externally with the engagement of residents?
Well, I think that for residents, you look at the stress caused by the external cladding on brand new buildings onto the residents, and having night watchmen, or what I can't remember what they're called, the people that have to stay up all night, the waking watch or whatever. I can't imagine what that's like. I'm very privileged. I go to bed at night with my all my fire safety and my alarms intact, and feel very comfortable. And I can't imagine what it feels like not to benefit from it. So in declaring that there's an issue, you have to be very careful in the way that that's communicated. And how fast can you do all this work? So if you declare it, there could be months before you can actually get on the site. So I think logistics and thinking it all through has been a massive issue. As far as the local authorities are concerned, they've all been moving in, we must build, build, build. Now they've got to look at their finances and say, actually, we might not be able to build. We might have to look for different ways to bring forward social housing. And there are different financial models now, because all our money has got to go on sorting this out. We must sort the safety out first. And I think that's the key thing, is the safety must be put right in the housing that they've got. At the same time, they must not inherit a safety problem from the new housing coming in. So that's where you get the safety. But there are, on some of the new housing, there are new business models in place where companies are saying, you rent these houses off me as social rent, and I'll build them for you. And then after 30 years, for £1, we'll give you each of the houses, a sale and lease back. So people are already trying to work out how to deliver the new homes when the local authorities actually don't have the money.
And Rob, we did some round tables around development, didn't we? And the new development and the abolishment of 106 within England, but then looking at what's happening in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales is slightly different everywhere, isn't there? Do you think there's a difference between each nation and also a difference between rural and urban settings?
I think, I mean, part of the problem, as Nick's alluded to, that social landlords face, and this does vary on the geography and where they're situated, is the era that some of the original stock that they're taking on was built. Where, for instance, I'm in Manchester, and where housing associations have inherited interwar municipal properties, they need to retrofit them quite often with modern safety standards, but they're well built more often than not. Whereas where they're inheriting 60s, 70s overspill properties, there, like exists in my ward, unfortunately, there you have a major problem, because it was quite often thrown up on the cheap. It was that kind of era, and as well as again having to retrofit according to modern safety standards, they're also having to do a heck of a lot of remedial work just to keep them standing. And what an interesting point I think that came out of the round tables that we ran, is that where they're also, on the other hand, so as well as all that, they're delivering new properties. Some of the problems that they face, for instance, with Section 106 agreements, they're being chucked these Section 106 houses, these sort of infill new things or things on new developments that you can't swing a cat in. You know, we heard that some of the developers have actually refused to take some of these sort of Section 106 agreed properties because it's built according to what the developer wants within the developer's scheme that actually doesn't bear any relation to what the housing association want and the kind of standards that they would expect of a new property and, in fact, an old property. I mean, this is a 1960s council house flat, and they built them huge. And of course, those standards since then have gradually sort of whittled away. And it's getting those properties back up after the past 30 years to a standard where not only are they spacious enough for families and fit to live in, they're also safe. And that, I think, is something that our task force and the discussions we're having will hopefully help housing associations to achieve.
I know you're seeing a difference, aren't you, from different nations, but the urban and rural aspect. If we talk about just the whole notion of urban areas not developing and people moving more into rural areas, but that also has a challenging time for many smaller district councils that may have originally not planned to have a certain population within those geographical areas. So I think it goes round in circles, isn't it? Regardless of what the agenda is, there is that, whether you have that flight of urban to rural and aging population, how that has an impact on the type of archetype in terms of type of build, and whether that's a retrofit challenge, and it's a whole engagement challenge. So it's that holistic approach again. You can't just take one approach to everything, can you?
I mean, we heard, didn't we, Tina, from some of the smaller, you know, we had, I think we had somebody from East Hertfordshire, Scarborough, we had a gentleman from a small housing association in South Wales. And quite often they, because of the scale of the housing that they have in those areas, they can be the only person doing their job. And they're running around in circles just trying to keep up with the modern safety standards, with the legislation, because the scale is a lot smaller. And that presents its own challenges, because half the time the work isn't smaller, it's just the number of properties they have to work on is smaller. So really the rural housing associations have a whole different problem that, again, you know, hopefully we can help them to overcome.
But I think the big thing that I'm very aware of is, because I had the housing portfolio for 2 years, and we were dealing with, I can't remember how many houses Kingston had or have now, but we never spoke about fire safety. We never spoke about any of those aspects. It was numbers, it was decent home standards, and I think that what we'll all be reminded is that you can't play. There's no circumstances in which you can play fast and loose with the word safety. That's one of the bottom line. You've got to tick that box before you can move on. And I think that wherever the circumstances are, that's going to be a massive issue, and rightly so. And as I say, going back to what we talked about earlier, dealing with that in retrospect is going to need everyone to be together and clear and supportive. And you're right, you said about the community engagement. The people living in homes, if you said, we're going to retrofit safety equipment into your home, they're going to go, so I'm unsafe now, am I? That's the immediate thing. Well, no, actually, you're not as safe as you should be, and we want you to be safer. But, you know, it's immediate. So managing all that is a massive distraction for all the teams. So it's a massive amount of work to achieve it.
But Nick, what do you think it needs from a local authority HA perspective to make that happen?
Courage to put right what they're embarrassed that is wrong in the first place, and to move on from that. I think there's a lot of people blushing that that's not been the essential foundation. Then it needs partners that can come in and say, we've done this elsewhere, we can help you here, follow this route to doing it, and bringing everyone on board together. And that's where, again, you know, your approach is going to win friends all over the place, because people don't have time to learn every lesson for themselves. So bringing it all together and giving them this library of experience, this academy of knowledge, I think will help people move on much quicker. And when you're covering something that you feel embarrassed about, it sometimes makes you more hesitant in case you haven't got it right this time. You want to get it right, and that confidence that you can build around the people who've got to deliver the improved safety will help tremendously.
And is that the key feedback you're getting from the social housing sector at this moment in time?
Yes, I think that the feedback I'm getting is that a lot of the housing associations have reacquainted themselves with their mission. Some have thought they were house builders. Some have become landlords and investors. But the core is about their social justice and their social relationship with the communities that they serve. And I think that it's really fascinating. If you talk to all the big housing associations, they will turn around and say, but it's about people. It's about home. It's about security. It's about welfare. It's about mental health. And those conversations, they were there. They were in the mission. Some of these big housing associations were small charities once upon a time by philanthropic people many years ago. And they're all referring back to that original mission. And I think that's really wonderful. So I think their mindset is in a pretty good place to now tackle some of the issues that have not always been quite as high on the list.
I think that's interesting from a housing association, because when a housing association builds in the area, it's not just building dwellings and houses, it's building a community. It's investing and creating a social economical growth in that area. And that is a massive investment, but something that shouldn't be thought or seen as a small contribution. It's a massive contribution, that impact a housing association can have in a geographical area.
Yes, and they can change people's lives in wonderful and miraculous ways. And I think the pandemic and the heart-stopping moment of realizing some of the lessons that are coming out of the inquiries has really brought people to their senses. They've had time. The leadership have had time. The trustees have had time to reflect. They've been locked up in their houses. And what's it like to live in a house? And we've all had that experience of living in our homes and seeing them differently.
And I think the local authorities have always invested in the whole area, whole geographical area. Are you seeing more collaborative working between housing associations, local authorities? And do you think if we were to, none of us have got a crystal ball, but if I was to take social housing in the next 5 years to 10 years, how would you see things being delivered in the social housing sector?
Well, I think that the social housing in the next 10 years has got to be, there's still some diversity in funding and delivery models yet to come. There's a lot of talk from people who are financiers, not house builders, about how that can be done. And some of that will work and some of it won't. I think that, I've been involved in one project, which has been to bring a housing association closer to the local authority in which it serves. They've distrust, they've drifted apart. One hasn't delivered on what the other one expectations were. And I've been trying to work on bringing them together, and fingers crossed it's going to work. And the people who are going to win are the residents of the borough who are living in those homes that are managed there. And I think there's the local authorities and the housing associations and other bodies have actually got to come closer. The developers have got to come closer. It's almost like each borough should have a housing conference, and it should be talking about its expectations. It should be finding reasons to enjoy the conversation about housing in their boroughs, rather than going, you're a nasty house builder and I don't want you, or I'm really frustrated with you, housing association, because all your residents are upset that you don't clear the grass away, or you're not maintaining the common areas properly, and they will write to me. We've got to move on, and local authorities have the ability to be the peacemakers and the community leaders. I think the housing associations and the house builders have a little bit of movement, but they're more willing than ever before, and move on. It's got to become a more shared vision and experience.
I think from what we're picking up, there's quite a lot to be done internally. I mean, Rob, you were a Lord Mayor. I mean, some people might think that's a nice role to go and actually serve a community, but you do that out of passion. Does it take every single member internally, and so we've got the relationship between housing association and local authority that needs to be forged a lot more closer. There needs to be partnerships with developers and other third sector charities in local areas. But everybody plays a part, don't they, Rob?
Yeah, I think part of the problem, and Nick alluded to it, is historically, sort of 15, 20 years ago, when social housing especially in the cities, was being moved away from local authorities and into these housing associations and housing trusts, there was almost a sort of, there was a real enthusiasm to get it out of that structure into a new independent trust, and it'll work better. I think something was missed at the time that we've sort of been paying the price for in the past 5-10 years, in that the relationship between the local authority and the housing associations and these new bodies, as they were then, they just weren't what they should be at all. That you had, because in the mind of the public, nothing had changed. They were still living in a house. As far as a lot of the sort of more elderly residents of my ward are concerned, they live in a council house. The fact it's owned by a housing association, completely independent of the local authority, doesn't occur to them. And they are still getting onto their local councillors for any problems that arise. And of course, as you can imagine, problems do arise. And then the local councillors are pursuing that with the housing association. And that can create, in some places, a very good relationship. But with other housing associations, particularly I've found where they've taken overspill on in a broad geographic area, there's a slightly antipathetic relationship going on, and has been for some time. And what needs to happen is a new culture, I think. There needs to be a new understanding, a new culture, a whole reset, I think, of that relationship between local authorities and housing associations, because it can only make everyone's life better. The residents, the councillors, and the housing associations. So hopefully, again, we can help achieve that.
Ultimately, where everyone's doing what we're doing, you're doing what you're doing, HA and local authorities are doing what they're doing, ultimately to create safer homes to keep people safe. Yeah. And that's what we're all doing. But my last parting question to both of you is, if you had a crystal ball, and if I could say to you, let's go forward 10 years, tell me what you think the key agendas in social housing will look like, and what those relationships will be in the future. That's beautiful.
Well, I'll go. I think that there'll still be a housing shortage in 10 years' time. Yeah. But I think that the quality and safety of the existing stock will be resolved, and people will feel better. They'll feel different than they ever realised they should have felt in the first place, because it will mean the integrity of the existing stock will be respected. And the working relationship, I hope, with everyone involved in social housing, including the residents, has improved exponentially. So we may still be chasing more housing, but at least we're doing it where the environment in which people are doing it is much more focused, and there's a shared mission that's delivering really great homes for people. Social housing, I think, is a phrase that is, in a way, it's a shame it exists, because it suddenly says something different. My grandparents had to be interviewed for their council house. Their street was pucker, and they had to win the right to have that house, and they were very proud of it. Why should people not be proud of the home that they live in, regardless of the economic status that they have in relation to it? So I think that that would be my big win, but there isn't enough money going to be around to resolve everything. So we'll still be building houses and still be filling them with people who are just absolutely thrilled to have a home.
Rob, your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with that. I mean, I always harp on about this, but I mean, I live in an area called Wythenshawe in Manchester, which is the second largest council estate for a very long time in the whole UK. And when my grandparents moved here, like next, they were delighted. It was a garden city. They had to show the marriage lines. They had to be interviewed. There's a little man who came round to check they were doing the garden, everything. And I think as time progressed, there was a period in the 80s and 90s that this and a lot of other housing estates, they became very, very difficult. There were no-go areas in them. And I think we're almost naturally, I think, seeing a reversal of that now. There's a real pride that's coming through, I think, in a lot of communities that perhaps wasn't there 20, 30 years ago. And to the point now that, right to buy has had effects, that are both positive and negative, but in terms of increasing the diversity of the people in a particular area, it's helped. There's a real pride amongst people of all tenures in the houses that they occupy, and people are delighted to live in places. You can almost see the change coming. There's litter pick groups, there's There's people working with housing associations where that didn't happen before. So I can really see a change coming, and it's palpable. And I'm just hoping that that will continue, and we will have a much better attitude to housing, and social housing particularly, in the future.
Do you think technology plays a part in it as well?
Yeah, undoubtedly. It plays a part in every aspect of the building, the safety. But I think that people will have to have it proven, and one of the things you're doing is investing in your products. I think that people will want to be very certain that what they're using delivers on the promise that you're making. And the technology of how to build blocks, I was smiling because the 70s block in Kingston is in fact the worst block I can think of for housing, and that was using prefabricated building materials. And then I hear about the modern day building materials that people are looking at, and I shiver. And then I think of the 1940s and 50s blocks that look beautiful, they just need a lick of paint, and they're all brick built and only of about 5 stories high. So I think that technology has a massive role to play, but people are going to be skeptical until they're comfortable that it delivers on the promise that they make.
And in a way, to add to that, I mean, we've all bought into new technology to a huge extent in the past 20 years, in all walks of life. And you imagine what we would have been like 20, 30 years ago if this lockdown had happened. We'd be climbing the walls because, if we had internet, it was dial up. There just wasn't, the things to do in the house. And now, of course, we can do our jobs at home because we have all the technology to enable us to do so. And I think in a way, that phenomenon could perhaps connect us with our homes as members of the public far more than used to be the case. So technology can be really positive.
Yeah, and the one thing I would add is that the most chilling comment I had when I was first a councillor was a lovely doctor said to me, "You've just got to face it, there are people behind their front doors waiting to die." That's how isolated he felt that some of the residents were. Well, with technology, if you can get people to embrace it, they can have calls like this, even if their mobility isn't great or they feel fragile. So I think that technology does help a great deal, and will make people feel more comfortable in their homes. But we mustn't forget that to sit on a bench with the real sun on your face is just a glorious experience. And so technology will never take away from natural opportunities.
We'll do that, won't we, now, from today onwards? 6 of us, 2 house meeting outside.
Yeah.
Go for a nice walk in the sun. That'll be lovely. But no, just the last comment. If there's any housing associations, local authorities or third sector charities or any organisation listening to our conversation today, what advice would you give them?
Rob?
You never know what benefits you might bring to each other, and I would just, that bottom line, just talk to each other.
And if people are nervous about talking to each other, then give us a call and we'll broker the relationship for them. But I agree. I think that it's see beyond the front door and see the people behind and embrace them. There is such a, I think, to supply people with their home, what a wonderful thing to do, and to make it safe and welcoming. Brilliant. So get back to celebrating what you're doing and share it with people.
And thank you very much, and thank you for all the work that we do together. It's a great pleasure. And
well, thank you for inviting us to work with you. It's great.
Yeah. It was great to hear from Tina Mistry there, our relationships manager, speaking to Nick Kilby and Rob Chilton. It was great to find out more about what Cratus do and how they support the industry and their customers. Now we're going to go to our frequently asked question, which is about the British standards this week. So I'm going to pass you over to my colleague, Holly.
Thank you, Alex. So as always, we're going to round up the episode with another FAQ. This week it's a slightly different one. So instead of alarms, we're going to be looking at the British standards. So I'm going to hand over to Indra and she's going to tell you some more about it.
Standards and regulations. British standard is a best practice guide. BS 5839 Part 6 2019 has been released in May, and that's what we're going to be going through. BS 5839 Part 6 2019 is applicable across UK to domestic premises, existing properties, and the new builds. Current version replaces BS 5839 Part 6 2013. This is a best practice guide, emphasis on fire risk assessment, and building regulations and other guidance documents are based around the advice provided by the standard. In the newest version of this British standard, you have Grade D and Grade F. Grade D alarms. Grade D has been split in two separate grades. Grade D1 means that alarm is mains powered with a tamper-proof battery backup. D2, mains powered device with a 9-volt replaceable battery backup. One of the main changes in BS 5839 Part 6 2019 is for the rented properties. All rented properties should comply with the Grade D1, which is the mains powered units with tamper-proof battery backup, and to comply with category LD2, that is escape routes, kitchen, and principal habitable rooms.
It was great to hear from Indra there, tell us more about the British standards and how that can be applied to fire alarms and carbon monoxide alarms. As Holly said, it's not indirectly about alarms itself, but the legislation around them. But that's all we've got time for this week. So it was great to hear from everyone that took part in Aico TV. Another episode of Dave Watts and his branded hats. But that's all we've got time for this week, so we hope you enjoyed it. And please follow us on social media on the following platforms:
Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and TikTok.
TikTok, yes, yeah, we're on TikTok. Yeah, please follow us on those platforms. Also, please subscribe to Aico TV on our YouTube channel, and we hope to see you again soon.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.